Good evening. Call this meeting to order of the Saco City Council for Monday, August 9, 2021. Let the time reflect 6:30. Let the record reflect that all members are present, including the city administrator and city clerk. At this time, I'd ask all of you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much, everyone. Under general tonight, to just let you know that some of the members of the Saco Little League team have been called up and are still playing, so therefore they will not be here tonight to receive their awards, but we will welcome them back in the 23rd, on the meeting on the 23rd. With that, move on to item 5, committee correspondence to council. Any committee correspondence at this time? Councilor Hatch.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Doyle. I attended my first Saco Energy and Sustainability Committee meeting on August 3rd. I was quite impressed with the work that goes on amongst our various departments. Particularly on that meeting, I'd like to just acknowledge Don Roth's report that the process of replacing the air conditioning units at the police station, the old ones were 20 plus years old and malfunctioning, has been quite a success. They're about 60% complete. The cost savings on that installation will be significant energy savings to our taxpayers. And for those of you who were privy to the budget discussions recently, that was a part of our funding discussion. So I just wanted to commend Facilities Manager Roth for that effort and the success of successfully deploying our tax dollars to a building improvement.
Thank you, Councilor Hatch. Any further committee correspondence to council? Moving on to item 6, public comment. I do have the public comment sign-up sheet, and first up is Chief of Police Jack Clements.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and City Administrator. I just wanted to come up real quick, and I kind of wanted to thank everybody in this community. Last Tuesday, we had our National Night Out event. I think everyone can agree the last year and a half has been kind of negative between COVID and everything else that's been going on. That event was, to say it was spectacular, I think is an understatement. I think we had about 1,500 people based on the amount of food that the fire department cooked. We did 700 hamburgers, about 800 hot dogs. It was great to see members of the community come out. Everybody had a really good time. It was very positive. And I think that event, to me, showed not only how great our city government is, but also businesses in our community, as well as our citizens. I really do think that Saco is a pretty amazing place to live, and seeing that Tuesday night firsthand, every year it's a good year, but this year was really amazing. So for that, I just wanted to come up and say thank you to all the city departments that chipped in, the local businesses, and of course our citizens for showing up. Absolutely wonderful event, and I'm looking forward to it next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Up next is Colin Chard.
Thank you, Mayor. Colin Chard, 72 Grant Road.
Thank you.
Council, I'm not the citizen that you see up here every week, and so I hope I'm not out of order here. I was hoping to make a public comment concerning the changes that have been proposed for the Historic Preservation Ordinance. Is this the time to do that?
This is the time to do that.
All right, thank you. So I'm here to ask the council to please make the changes recommended by the planning board. I understand that we're all pretty tight on time here, and I'm limited to 3 minutes, but you should be assured that we hashed it over in good shape at the planning board level. I think we dotted most of the I's there, and the report out of that board was to strike 72 Grant Road from the list of properties proposed to be subjected to Historic Preservation Commission Certificate of Appropriateness review. So I would say that it was recommended to be stricken from that list for good reason. And I think among those good reasons are that that particular property out in North Saco, beautiful North Saco, is significant for interior features and not because of the exterior of the structure. And I would like you to note, please, my counsel, Mr. Mayor, that the authority for the Historic Preservation Commission, their regulatory authority lies with the exterior of structures and not with the interior of structures. If I could please refer you to the packet that was published, I think for the prior meeting, it's not contained, those materials aren't contained in the packet published for this meeting, but I'd like you to please refer to page 178, which is a copy of the findings of the United States Department of the Interior. So that federal department found that this particular property was significant for remarkably well-preserved stenciled wall decorative treatment. That is an interior feature. If you would look at page 191 of that previously published packet, you'll see that there is the applications, is a component part of the application for inclusion on the National Register of Historic Places, and it notes that the areas of significance for that particular property are art. If you refer to page 192, you'll see it written there that the primary significance of the property rests with its interior features and not as a picture of a main farm. And that was in terms of sort of confining the area of the designation. I think if you also, some of those materials, just for clarification's sake, some other structures are apparently were appurtenant to 72 Grant Road in the past. That is no longer the case. The farm, as I'm sure you're all aware, is across the road. And then you can see some photos of the structure, pages 194 through 198. So, as I stated, because the historical significance of this property lies with its interior features, by rights it should fall outside of the regulatory authority of the Historic Preservation Commission. If it were to be included and become subject to that authority, I posit that it would be receiving a disparate treatment than other similarly situated properties. Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if this council receives exhibits during public testimony.
Sure.
May I approach?
Sure.
So I have here, I think I've got 9 copies here.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I should get them. Just several properties that are what I consider to be similar structures. That is, they are the sort of the quintessential contiguous colonial Maine farm complex properties. I think most of these are out in Ward 2. I'd ask you to take particular attention to the farm structures pertinent to the Wayway store. I confirmed today the current map that's on the Saco Web GIS, and it appears to me that the Wayway store is itself on the same parcel as those farm structures pictured there on the first page that I consider to be very attractive example of contiguous Maine farmhouse architecture. The Wayway store is on the National Register of Historic Places, but the appurtenant farm structures are not. It would seem a little incongruous to me that 72 Grant Road would be subject to review where this farmhouse and the others that I've included in these 4 exhibits would not be. I had also, on a personal note, as the person living in that house, I've made this point before the Historic Preservation Commission and before the Planning Board, and I'd like to present it to you as well, if I could, please. And that is that I'm simply concerned with the safety and privacy issue where this is being publicized as a resource that is the interior of my home. And I really am concerned with my own privacy, the safety of myself and my family. Should people feel encouraged to approach my home and to peer into the windows so that they might be able to observe the artwork that is the component part that's pertinent to the registry on the National Register of Historic Places. So, could you please heed the Planning Board's recommendation and strike 72 Grant Road from the list? Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Debbie Sparks. Again, for all the commenters, please speak directly into the microphone. State your name and address for the record.
Hi there, my name is Debbie Sparks and I live at 7 Ashwamp Road. And I'm here tonight in support of Riverwinds Farm and the contract zone amendment to allow them to host events open to the general public. I've been to the farm several times for events with family and friends, and it's always been very professional, very organized and enjoyable, and I think that having a facility of that nature available to the citizens of Saco is a huge asset to the city of Saco. And that's all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next is Rob Biggs.
Rob Biggs, 92 Middle Street. I would like to thank Mayor Doyle and this esteemed City Council for considering my appointment to the Planning Board tonight. Prior to my coming to Saco, I was in the commercial real estate and construction development business for 30-plus years, with the last 9 years as the Executive Vice President at C.B. Richard Ellis in charge of construction management. C.B. Richard Ellis is the world's largest commercial real estate and development firm. Since moving to Saco in 2015, I have been intimately involved with this great community as the Executive Director of Saco Main Street, a member of the Historical Preservation Commission, and ex officio on the Economic Development Commission, and as a member of the Long Range Planning Committee. When considering this appointment, it was exciting, as I see great opportunities for Saco's future and look forward to being a continued part of that future. Again, I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Rob. Up next is Gary Prohlman.
Good evening. My name is Gary Prohlman. I live at 743 Portland Road. I own the property. I operate a law office out of it, and we also operate Barreled Souls Brewery out of it. I'm here to support Riverwinds in their application for the contract zoning amendment, as I believe it serves the best interests of Saco and our community and the citizens of Saco. I don't know if any of you people have been out to the farm. I went and took a look out there myself because I wanted to see for myself what exactly was going on out there. And I've traveled all over the country. I've never seen anything like that, a property like that, a venue like that, especially in a small town like Saco. I believe the property is magnificent, and the amount of money that has been invested by Miss Austin to make it a premier event location is quite obvious. From my perspective, the property is incomparable, even in the state of Maine. There's very few sites like that, and we should be promoting places like that and supporting them as a treasure of Saco, and trying to promote that as part of our package for Saco. I also believe that Miss Austin has achieved all of this while also keeping the imprint on the neighborhood pretty much status quo, and probably has increased the value of properties around the area. When I drove out there and walked the property, I didn't see any tangible detriment to any abutters, but tremendous upside to the citizens of Saco and our city. We've got a premier event location that is suitable for a wide variety of events, including civic fundraisers, which we should be proud of and applaud Ms. Austin for her efforts. This is a first-class operation, and it's very rarely seen in a small place like Saco. Additionally, whenever you've got an event, when people have a location like that, people come into these events, and they come in and they shop at our shops in town, they stay at our hotels, they go to our restaurants, and they may even stay a few days and make a weekend here or a few days here. So it helps in a lot of different ways. As a citizen of Saco, it's nice to know if I want to do a special event or a fundraiser. I know we've got a great location right here in the city of Saco, and we don't have to travel to Portland for a venue. We should be encouraging and assisting first-class operations like this one that bring in tax revenues for our city, provide a great benefit to our citizens, and a first-class business, and have no tangible detrimental impact to any of the abutters that I saw or the footprint in the area. I believe Riverwind's application fully meets the best interest test required by Article 14, Section 1405 for contract zoning, and that's why I unequivocally and without reservation support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Steve Dupuy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Stephen Dupree, 3 Stacy Street, Saco. I am also here in support of the amendment to the Riverwinds contract zone. Just for a little bit of background, my family used to own this property from about 1920 until the end of the 60s, and they operated as a dairy farm where they raised 9 children. My father was born in the farmhouse in 1924. I wholeheartedly support amending the contract zone for self-sponsored events. I think my family is very, very happy that the farm has been able to be continued in this manner and not chopped up to become a subdivision. I think we should do everything in our power to enable Beth Austin to maintain and preserve the character and quality of this property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Up next is Ruben Bell.
Hello, thank you. My name is Ruben Bell. I am from 121 North Street, and I'm also here in favor of the Riverwinds contract zone application. I'm an event guy. I own Blue Elephant Events and Catering. We've been on Pepperell Square since we opened in 2007, and I've worked at a lot of different kinds of venues all over the state in my career. And it's we primarily do weddings and corporate events. The self-sponsored events are not something that I would get into with Riverwinds. I want to make that clear. But it's rare to me to see a venue owner put as much time, resources, and effort into improving and maintaining the integrity of the property. I think Beth Austin has done a great job with that. It's clear that she wants to keep it a great place. And I will say that I've attended a couple of events there over the last 2 years with my husband and daughter. We did a holiday event once with some sleigh rides. We were at a horse event that they did, and one concert at some point that was outside. And they were all 3 different crowds, all family-oriented. They were excellent events, and I think that's something we very much could use more of in Saco. I think it's a wonderful use for the space, so thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Beth Austin.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Gina's setting up a little visual for you. Maybe the people at home can see also. It was brought to my attention that,
Beth, can you just state your name and address
Oh,
for
I'm
the
sorry.
record and
Yep.
speak a little bit closer to the microphone so everyone can hear you?
all right, my name is, that's loud, Beth Austin, and I live at 139 Loudon Road. It was brought to my attention that written in the meeting item commentary, the word private was injected describing the CZA September 2017. This is not consistent with how the contract zone is actually written and may cause confusion as to what we are currently allowed to do and what we are seeking to do. I brought this board to detail the correct and factual information about Riverwinds Farms operations. Riverwinds has all the licenses and permits listed, including establishment year. We have the victrolar's license, special entertainment permit, health license for catering, liquor license, dance license, reseller's certificate, all from the state of Maine. Riverwinds is licensed and legally permitted to operate as an event venue by the city and state. Riverwinds has always supported and continues to support the rural and agricultural preservation of the property for 20 years now at 121 Loudon Road. We believe Riverwinds poses no traffic or public safety issues to Loudon Road or the city of Saco. No business notifications on file with the Saco PD. Riverwinds complies with the 10 p.m. quiet time. There are no valid noise complaints with the Saco PD. Riverwinds has a written capacity from the State Fire Marshal's office of 288 without tables and chairs and 175 with tables and chairs. Riverwinds also, from the State Fire Marshal's office, does not need to be sprinkled, having 2 11-foot egresses and 4 man-door egresses. Riverwinds is allowed to host self-sponsored events under the qualified catering license. We started this process in September 2020 after Code Officer Lambert served us stating that we were not covered to host public events. We were totally transparent in our hosting, publishing the events on social media because we were not aware that in the current contract zone and similar events did not cover self-hosting or AKA self-sponsored events, a term not of convolution or made up by Riverwinds Farm, but the term actually used by the state of Maine and on the state's permit application, which I passed out earlier, which we dutifully submitted and were approved, a total of 12 events. During this year-long process, there was much misinformation and damaging comments, such as operating illegally and without licenses. And the statement that resonates most is modus operandi of asking for forgiveness in lieu of permission. Riverwinds Farm sought the permission from the state as required and in writing that governs qualified catering licensing. Riverwinds did not seek city approval since the CZ currently reads a commercial use that may operate either fully enclosed within a building or outdoors that provides a place for public gatherings such as weddings, graduations, horse shows, anniversaries, and similar events. It was under the guidance of then city planner, Mr. Hamlin, who stated and similar events would give us the leeway to try other types of events. Lastly, and most recently, the issue of winter events has come up. Riverwinds can request events outside of the season, and permission can be granted by the city planner per the site plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is all folks that have signed up for public comment on the sign-up sheet. Is there any last-minute public comment? Moving on from public comment. Brings us to item 7 of the agenda, approval of the minutes for July 26, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Councilor Berman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion? Roll call vote on the minutes. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
No.
Motion passes 6-1. Move on to item 8, consent items. There are several consent items for tonight. Item A, confirm mayor's appointment to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board of Michael Pinnette. Item B, confirm mayor's appointment to the Planning Board for Rob Biggs. Item C, confirm mayor's reappointment to the Economic Development Commission, Andrew Goldberg. Item D, adding an August 30th council meeting. Item E, acceptance of wage and compensation survey. Item F, application for solid waste permit, Troiano Waste Services, Inc. Any of these things? Councilor Johnston.
Oh, thank you. I'd request that we pull items E and F from the consent agenda. Thank you.
Items E and F will become action items under agenda item 9. Is there a motion to move forward with the consent agenda, items A, B, C, and D?
So moved.
Councilor McPhail, is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilor Hatch, any discussion on the consent items? Roll call vote on the consent items. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item 9 of the agenda. We'll take up item E first, acceptance of wage and compensation survey. That is Councilor Archer.
Sorry about that. The City of Saco partnered with MRI to conduct a wage and compensation analysis following a request for proposals process. Over a few months, city staff worked closely with MRI to review wages and benefit offerings from identified comparable communities. As you will see in the letter of transmittal and report, this study provides Saco with a comprehensive review of the classification and compensation practices for the existing non-union positions and a positive structure system to utilize that provides an equitable plan moving forward. Additionally, the survey data provided union positions that have been beneficial during negotiations. According to Granville, you will observe in the report that Saco is well positioned with the comparable communities due to City Council's cost of living adjustment strategy in recent years. Administrating the 3% COLA for the last few years has kept Saco competitive with neighboring communities. This report is helpful for providing a foundation structure to ensure fair and equitable compensation decisions. The compensation chart will be updated yearly to reflect any COLA increases the City Council approves. Be it authorized that the City Council adopt City of Saco compensation and classification study dated June 2021.
Motion's been made by Councilor Archer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston?
The motion's to adopt something, but I didn't find a report in the packet. I may have missed it. Maybe it was sent to us previously, but is there an actual report we're adopting?
Mr. Mayor.
City Administrator Kendrick.
Yes, there is. It should have been emailed to you separately because we paid a large sum of money for this report. We didn't want to put it just in a public document on the website, but it should have been emailed to you in a separate email.
Well, thank you for that, but it's a public document if we use public funds on it, so it really should have been included so the public could see it, is my feeling on it. So I don't know how other councilors feel, but I don't know how much we spent on it either, but it certainly seems like something that should be made available to the public before we go ahead and adopt it.
Any other comments? Councilor Johnston, would you like to make a motion to table until next meeting when it can be put on there as an item?
So moved.
Councilor Johnston makes a motion to table. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Motion to table, roll call to table. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to table passes 7-0. Brings us to item E, an application for solid waste permit, Troiano Waste Services. And that is Councilor Johnston.
Troiano Waste Services, Inc. has applied for a solid waste permit for a period of 1 year. The applicant has paid all applicable permit fees as required by Chapter 181 Solid Waste Article 2 licenses, 181-21. Be it ordered that the City Council grant the application for solid waste permit as submitted by Troiano Waste Services, Inc. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. It seems every few years I have to bring this up, but I just request that the city clerk send notice to not just this particular applicant, but all solid waste applicants that there's a period of time when waste can be collected. I pretty regularly have waste collected in my neighborhood at 3 a.m., and I know there's many others in the downtown or other areas that have this same issue. So if we could just notice them again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Any further discussion on this item? City Administrator Canrath, can we make sure that the waste services industries are notified of our good neighbor timeframes for pickup?
We will work to do that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to what was item A, now item C, on page 17, a public hearing, Article 19.
Mr. Mayor, I first would like to make a motion to reconsider the vote taken at the July 26, 2021 City Council meeting on the Chapter 81 conveyance of city-owned property, clear parcels, at the second and final reading to authorize the city administrator to sell 841 to 853 Portland Road.
Motion has been made to reconsider by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, that motion is out of order. Do we have Mr. Murphy present?
Do we have Mr. Murphy present?
Tim Murphy is not in state this week, but we do potentially have him on the phone. If need be, we could call him.
Let's see if it gets a second first. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail, second by Councilor Berman, for reconsideration of a vote from July 26th, which was a final reading, conveyance of city-owned property, clear parcels. Councilor McPhail was in the prevailing side of that negative vote. So now we will deal with the motion to reconsider. Councilor Johnston, I disagree that the motion's out of order. Having looked into this, we will get a legal opinion on it.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I suggest you refer to the city charter, 2.08, letter E.
Councilor Johnston, again, as we've done this many times before, I'm going to disagree. And
Again, that's fine, we can disagree. The point is that the motion should not have just occurred, because if you read the charter in section E on the procedures for the agenda, and I'm not talking about what council discussed earlier via emails, I'm talking about the agenda. We closed the agenda 48 hours ago. Nothing new can come before council. So it's right there, it's in the charter. I'm sure that Mr. Attorney Murphy will probably have a different opinion. It won't be the first time, but I suggest, I know we've done this before. I was part of that council, and that's separate from this. This is about noticing the public in the agenda that went out on Friday. There's nothing on this agenda tonight that talks about reconsideration. Thank you.
Councilor Johnston, thank you very much for that. Council, at this time, I believe that we are okay to do this because there's no way for the city administrator and myself and the city staff to think that there's going to be a reconsideration vote prior to somebody coming up with it at a meeting. So could this have happened last week? It could have, and then we would have known and been able to put it on the agenda.
In the same meeting, Mr. Mayor, again,
Excuse me, I have the floor.
If we refer back to the one that you and I were a part of.
Councilor Johnston, you're out of order. I have the floor.
Very well.
So therefore, I think we can go ahead and do this, but we'll just put it to a vote of the body. So I have overruled Councilor Johnston's motion here. Now we will take it to a vote of this body on whether we will move forward with the reconsideration. Councilor Archer.
No.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
No.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
No.
The motion to move forward with the reconsideration passes 4-3. So we will move forward with the motion as Councilor McPhail has read it. Councilor McPhail, can you read that one more time into the record?
I move to reconsider the motion and vote taken at the July 26, 2021 City Council meeting on the Chapter 81 conveyance of city-owned property, clear parcels, at the second and final reading to authorize the city administrator to sell 841 to 853 Portland Road.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on this? Councilor Johnston,
I asked for legal opinion.
and we'll get a legal opinion.
Well, is that not what we're talking about? That's my question. Can we have the legal opinion, not on whether or not we could reconsider this, not refuting that. It has to do with the agenda. And as I was trying to state previously, when we previously did this several years ago, when it came to the school construction, it was posted in the agenda. We knew we were going to reconsider it. This is past that time. This is in the same meeting, you can come to a reconsideration. In this particular case, you or somebody, whoever decided to ultimately do this, we had 2 weeks. I don't know why we didn't discuss this 2 weeks ago as far as the potential of whatever was discussed in those emails today. And again, as I indicated in those emails, I'm a bit concerned that this council proceeded to have a discussion that wasn't in view of the public, which is pretty clear to me that that's a violation of the open meeting laws. And it's honestly something that happens quite frequently, and it should have been stopped immediately. So I await to hear Mr. Murphy's opinion.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Would you like to make a motion to table the reconsideration vote until the 23rd, when we can get a legal opinion on the matter?
Sure. I mean, so moved. I would just think that that would probably interfere with the time frame here of a reconsideration, but that's fine.
There's been a motion to table. Is there a second?
Second.
By Councilor Johnston, second by Councilor Archer. Any roll call vote on the motion to table? Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
No.
Councilor Gunn?
No.
Councilor Berman?
No.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
No.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to table fails 4-3. Back to the item of reconsideration. Any further discussion? Councilor Archer?
If you could just give me the latitude, I'm still going to vote on the reconsideration, but I just want to just clarify what I know from Councilor Johnston's perspective. Not trying to change minds, but to bring an item on the floor at the last minute requires an emergency. He is accurate that it would have been required. So there is a issue to legality of this vote because of we're not following the bylaws, and Councilor Johnson was correct. It needs to be an emergency item, and I can't say that a sale of a property would fall under emergency. So just wanted to put that out, but I am willing to vote, but there could be a challenge.
Thank you, Councilor Archer.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Hatch?
Is it possible to get a clarification of the information that we have in front of us to vote on with maybe Ms. Clavette? Or is that out of order?
You can ask staff questions, sure.
Okay. I'm
Director
just trying to
Clavette?
I'm just trying to get my arms around the motivation of this reconsideration, and I'm going to tell you what I understand, and if I don't understand it correctly, if you could correct me. Apparently, if we vote no on this motion that was before us earlier, your concern is that we take the parcel offline for a year, and if this, and I believe the reason we we did that, and our original vote was to allow the schools to have an opportunity to review the parcel as a possible site location. So we take it offline for a year, and then we come back and we need to vote again, and that has to go back through the Chapter 81 process, which, as I recall, took a few meetings to accomplish. And you're asking that we contain, the new motion contains language that authorizes the city administrator to sell those parcels while simultaneously including the retention of a portion of the parcel for municipal or school use. Is that understanding correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, if we do that, I'm trying to envision a developer interested in buying that parcel, knowing that we have every right to reserve a portion of the parcel for school, and how that likely might impede a sale. And we're only talking a year, not the end of the world. So I just wanted to make sure I understood before I cast my vote, and I appreciate you helping me make sure that I understood.
If you would like further clarification on the rationale behind not waiting an entire year, I'd be happy to provide that, but I don't want to presume and assume that you want to have the answer to that question.
No, I just want to make sure I understood the motivation correctly, and it appears that I do. So
That is correct.
I'm happy with that.
Any other questions for Director Clavette?
No, not for Director.
Okay, for reconsideration, just to bring it to the floor for reconsideration is what we're doing. Any further discussion? Council Archer.
Yes, my question on this is, typically, this was based on a staff email to council. Typically, staff does not ask council for reconsideration. That's a councilor decision. So I did think that was a little unique. I'll just go there. With our new process of how there's a new council every year, why are we reconsidering when in December it's a new council? Every year it can just come back to the floor. So I really don't want to set the precedence of staff asking council to make reconsiderations, because that consideration was based on through deliberations in the moment. If we weren't ready to vote, then it should have been a table. So again, for me, this is just, I do not like the precedence of what's going on today. It was a very last minute request of around 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, give or take. I did think it was kind of, again, out of the ordinary, and especially with a new council where we're always having to be a new body in December, it's really not even needed, because in 4 months, you've got a new council. So that's why I'm more against this reconsideration. It's not really necessary, and it does create creates a precedence. So that's really why I'm against the reconsideration, not necessarily the sale of the property. But thank you.
Thank you, Council Archer. City Administrator Kainroth.
Thank you. Just quickly on behalf of city staff, there was never any request from staff to reconsider on this matter. This came from the council or a councilor, but there was never any city staff directing this or telling any councilor or anyone up here to reconsider. Just to be clear, there was no direction from a staff to a councilor to reconsider. And that's obviously any councilor's choice, whether they'd like to move to reconsider.
Councilor Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At least one issue for me that was reflected in the discussion at the last meeting was the consequences of a no vote. And part of the discussion and part of my rationale for voting no was to reserve this land for consideration by the school construction committee, at which point, if it wasn't used for the schools, then the city could put it up for sale. Subsequent to that discussion and vote, additional information came out that this property may be offline, quote unquote, for a year, regardless of the school decision. Counselor Archer has just issued a third opinion that maybe it's with the new council that the motion could come back for reconsideration. So we've had 3 opinions about the timeline for this that, at least in my mind, has created the confusion that's led to the need for reconsideration of that vote. When the property could be released for sale is the critical issue of this discussion, and the information was incomplete at the last meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Any further discussion? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I agree with Councilor Archer's statements. In addition, I find it a bit concerning, the statements just made by the administrator, whereas he says an individual counselor made this request. I've been requesting items be added to this agenda, or our agendas, for well over a year, yet apparently certain counselors get preference. I don't know how that's determined, but not only preference, it's not less than 24 hours. We have a duty per the city charter that 48 hours prior our agenda is closed. I didn't make that up. I didn't write it. It's been that way for as long as I can recall, going all the way back to the 1970s when the charter was first approved. In addition, there seems to be this question that some are talking about. The public doesn't have any knowledge of it because it was done in an email, as I stated previously, about this property being offline. I've yet to see a legal opinion on that. I don't really understand how it could be. The city owns it. So if we wanted to let the city fire department, police department, wastewater, you name it, any department, including the schools that are connected to the city of Saco, the municipal government, you don't have to go through Chapter 81 review. And if someone's going to tell me different, I would ask, how is it that we've done this previously with a fire department, a police department? They never had Chapter 81 reviews to simply use the land. We own it. Chapter 81 exists for the sale of property. That's it. And it's there to ensure that counselors, not necessarily us, but in general, counselors don't do backroom deals. That's why it was put into the code. That's the reason for it. So we don't just sell off land without having the public participate in that process, because it's not our land, it's the public's. So again, I don't understand where that even came from. It's the first I heard of it 2 weeks ago. I don't remember if it was Councilor Berman or another. We asked staff that was here, is there any conflict here with selling it? The response was no, it didn't seem urgent. So I find it hard, from where I'm sitting, with the knowledge I have, that there doesn't seem to be something going on in the background. And I'm not saying there is, but that's how it feels to me. So what does the public feel in general when we do these things? You know, we've had months. This goes back to pre-us being in these rooms again, you know, back in Zoom when we first discussed this. And even then it was like, why are we selling this? I never could get a clear answer. Members of the public asked that. They've asked staff that. Why are we selling this? Oh, we're just taking the appetite for the desire to sell it. Why? I've said it all along. If someone wants to buy the property, they could have come to us, and then we could have initiated the Chapter 81 review. What we've done is backwards, and it's not the first time we've done this process. We did it with the DPW garage, too, the same way. It seems like there's a conclusion already to be made here. That's my issue. And in addition, again, I've said, I'm still waiting for Mr. Murphy's opinion on this. I would honestly think that the action that we all just took was really against the charter because, again, you can't add things to the agenda. Period. It's right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Any further comments on the reconsideration of the July 26th, item D, final reading, Chapter 81, conveyance of city-owned property, clear parcels. On the reconsideration, any further discussion? Roll call vote on the reconsideration. Councilor Archer.
Abstain. I don't believe we can make this vote per the charter.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
No.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
No, on the grounds you just illegally added an agenda item to a public agenda that was already noticed.
The reconsideration of item D, Chapter 81, conveyance of city-owned property, passes 4-2 with one abstention. That brings it forward for consideration. And that was Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the City Council authorize the City Administrator to sell 841 to 853 Portland Road through a request for proposal, RFP process, and that the sale of these parcels include the ability, if needed, for the city to retain a portion of the parcels for municipal or school purpose, and that the top 3 RFPs come back to the City Council for review and recommendation at a City Council executive session.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. Discussion on the new motion. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Again, we've discussed this for several weeks. We never actually went over the method of sale. I brought that up at the end of, or the close of last meeting. I am a bit curious why we're doing RFP process, and I will state again that my feeling on the RFP process is that there's a conclusion already here. If we are just looking to sell this property to create $1 million, as this has been disclosed to the public, that's the potential value of this property, why wouldn't you just put it on the open market and allow the commercial, or maybe not a commercial, anybody could buy it at that point. I don't like this process. I didn't like it previously, as I stated before. The DPW garage, just list the property and see what we get and make that decision. Instead, we're going to, try to pigeonhole what we want, supposedly, which ultimately, my experience up here is we already have a conclusion. And until someone proves me otherwise, I'm going to stick with that. And that certainly seems exactly what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Councilor McPhail.
Yep, just to address that, that's part of the reason of doing it as an RFP, so that it comes to council, that everything is on the table. And we have the choice, making sure that we are taking the consideration of the schools as well as other municipal departments and buildings first. The parcel is large enough to be able to accommodate both schools and potential businesses. And again, bringing it by RFP to the council, we have the choice.
Not to get into a debate here, but we would have that choice based on any contract we put forth in a real estate agreement, too. Ultimately, council has the final say whether we sell something. That's also part of code.
Any further discussion? Councilor Purdy.
I voted to sell. I was in the minority at the last meeting. But just to be clear, my question is, by bringing it back for reconsideration and the legal questions that have been raised, we voted to bring it back for reconsideration. Does that necessarily mean that the vote has to be taken tonight? Can it be put on an agenda 2 weeks from now to give time for legal opinions and for the information to be available to the public before we make the vote?
Councilor Purdy, you could make a motion to table if that's what you're talking about.
So moved.
Motion to table by Councilor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. No discussion on motion to table. Roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Mr. Mayor, can you just correct me? Didn't we request a table and then that failed?
Requested it to table on the reconsideration. You've now reconsidered it.
So this
It's
is on the
This is
actual
a motion to table on the actual motion.
Okay, thank you. I still abstained for the original reasons, procedure 2.08, section E, published agenda.
One abstention so far. Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
No.
Motion passes 5-1 and 1 abstention. Motion to table. That brings us to what was item C, now item D, a public hearing on Article 19, Historic Preservation Amendments, page 17 in your packet. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At their meeting on September 23rd, 2020, the HPC directed staff to initiate the process to amend the Historic Preservation Chapter of the zoning ordinance previously known as 230 through 413, now known as Article 19. The HPC has spent the past several months discussing and workshopping proposed changes. Highlights of the proposed changes include the ability for the City Council to create a, quote, historic landscape district, unquote, in order to protect historically and culturally significant parks and open spaces. Requirement for landmarks listed on the National Register of Historic Places to undergo certificate of appropriateness, review for qualified exterior changes. Specific material preferences for new construction are now noted. Additional clarification regarding which exterior changes require certificate of appropriateness review. And requirement for changes to public improvements, for example, sidewalks, within the historic district to undergo certificate of appropriateness review. The Historic Preservation Commission held a public hearing on these proposed changes during their meeting on April 14th, 2021, and voted unanimously to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for adoption of the amendments as drafted. The Planning Board held a public hearing on the proposed changes during their meeting on June 1st, 2021, and voted unanimously to forward a positive recommendation for adoption of the amendments, but noted that they recommended removing the 72 Grant Road property from the list of National Register listed properties that would require local review, as the historic significance of the property lies within the interior of the structure and not the exterior. Some minor clerical changes that were brought up during the first reading on this item have been made to the proposed red line document. No substantial changes have been made at this time. Staff recommends that the council receive public comment on the proposed amendments and schedule this item for a second and final reading and vote. I move to open the public hearing on the proposed amendments to Article 19 of the zoning ordinance.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Archer to open the public hearing. Any discussion? Roll call vote to open the public hearing. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
As I indicated last week, due to the fact that my residence and several other properties I'm connected to are slated to be added to the HPC ordinance, I will abstain.
Motion passes 6-0 with 1 abstention at 7:28. The public hearing is now open on the item. Is there anybody wishing to speak during the public hearing?
Hello again, Colin Chard, 72 Grant Road. I don't mean to hold up the show, good council and mayor. I would note, separate and apart from what I had presented earlier, I think there is a fiscal impact to this particular amendment that is very real, and I think there is also, it may become problematic, and I foresee sort of litigation concerning all reasonable measures to preserve historic wooden sash. Some of that language is problematic to me. So I thought I'd toss that up there. This tens of millions of dollars of real estate is going to be impacted by this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment during the public hearing? Councilor Gunn.
Thank you. I move to close the public hearing on the proposed amendments to Article 19 of the zoning ordinance and schedule the second and final reading for August 23rd, 2021.
Motion to close the meeting and set final reading has been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion? Councilor Purdy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I said, last time this was before us, excuse me, I'd like to make an amendment to remove the property at 72 Grant Road from the list of properties to be included.
Councilor Purdy, you'd like to make an amendment to remove property at 72 Grant Road?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Amendment made by Councilor Purdy, second by Councilor McPhail, to remove 72 Grant Road. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote on the amendment only. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Abstain.
Motion passes 6-0 with one abstention on the amendment only. Back to the main motion as amended, which is closing the hearing and setting final reading with this new amendment. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Abstain.
The motion passes 6-0 with one abstention. So the public hearing is now closed at 7:31 p.m. Its final reading will be on August 23rd. That brings us to item B, what was item B, now item E on the agenda. One reading, Saco Island Multimodal Bridge PACTS funding endorsement. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In late October 2020, the City of Saco, in coordination with Saco Main Street and the City of Biddeford, signed a contract with consultant Thornton Tomasetti to complete the Saco Island Multimodal Bridge concept plan for the proposed bridge across the Saco River parallel to the railroad tracks connecting the Saco Transportation Center and Lincoln Street in Biddeford. Creating a connection between Saco and Biddeford in this area has been a long-term goal for both the cities. The report determined that it is feasible to construct a bicycle pedestrian bridge at this location. 4 alternatives were identified and presented in the final report. Based on the preliminary findings of the concept plan, the cities of Saco and Biddeford applied to PACTS for Federal Highway Administration for preliminary design funding on March 2, 2021. If the project is selected by the PACTS Policy Board and endorsed by both the City Saco Council and the Biddeford City Council, this would secure 75% funding for the preliminary design phase of the project in 2021. This would obligate PACTS and both municipalities to complete the final design and construction after 2024. Additional details and cost estimates are outlined in the staff memo dated July 28, 2021. If approved and endorsed by both cities, Saco's share the match for the next phase of the project will be up to approximately $43,750, which has already been allocated in the TIF budget for fiscal year 2022. The city will then be obligated to pay 12.5% of the final design and construction cost of the bridge in 2024 or later. Depending on which bridge design is selected during the preliminary design phase, the final design and construction cost to the city, 12.5% match, will range from approximately $542,500 to $1,062,500. Staff has determined that the city's downtown TIF has sufficient funds to fully fund the city's 12.5% match for the final design and construction phase of the project by 2024. The findings of the concept plan and an update on the PACTS funding was discussed with Council as a new business item on June 28, 2021. At this meeting, Council expressed general support for the project. I move to endorse the Saco Island Multimodal Bridge project for funding through the PACTS Federal Highway Administration funds for complex projects and commit to providing half of the commensurate match for the complete project should PACTS fund the federal portion, and the City of Biddeford also endorses the project.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to what was item C, now item F. It was tabled from July 12, 2021, a final reading, Riverwinds Farm Contract Zone. Is there a motion to untable the matter?
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Archer to untable. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Roll call vote on untabling. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion on table passes 7-0. Brings us to the main motion. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Riverwinds Contract Zone was approved by City Council in July 2015, which allowed the establishment of an educational horseback riding program, a use not otherwise allowed in the C1 zone. Beth Austin, proprietor of Riverwinds Farm and Estate, then sought approval for an amendment to the contract zone, which was granted by the council in September 2017, allowing the establishment of a venue for hosting private events such as weddings, graduation parties, and similar events on the property, a place of public assembly. Ms. Austin now proposes to amend the contract zone again, seeking approval to hold self-sponsored events on the property, which would allow public events such as comedy shows, dinner theater, music, holiday shows, special community classes, and events and open houses. The Planning Board reviewed the proposed amendment at its March 16, 2021 meeting and voted 3-0 to forward a negative recommendation to Council. I move to approve the final reading and adopt the proposed amendment to the contract zone by and between Riverwinds Farm LLC, Riverwinds Trail LLC, and Riverwinds LLC and the City of Saco.
Motion's been made by Councilor Archer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Discussion? Councilor Archer?
Yes, I'd like to propose an amendment to the contract zone specifically. Under the paragraph of where it discusses what the self-sponsored events are, I would like to make an amendment that we change the terms. One, omit the term similar. We want to clean up this document by saying self-sponsored events, including comedy shows, dinner theater, music shows, holiday, special community classes, events, and open houses, and then a special section reserved to be drafted by legal to limit the amount of participants by 200 for self-sponsored events specifically, and to have no more than 20 events in an annual year for self-sponsored events.
Could you email that to the city administrator?
I definitely could. We did discuss, and we were going to wrap up the legal side of it, just clear it up so that there's no grayness.
Thank you. So the amendment has been made by Councilor Archer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Discussion on the amendment. Councilor Johnston?
Would Councilor Archer be willing to shrink that time frame to 8 months from May to December, make it more seasonal?
That actually wasn't part of the contract zone. That's part of the site plan, if I remember correctly.
I was trying to incorporate it into the CZA itself.
I hear what you're saying. Okay, so.
But I obviously am in agreement since I seconded the 20. I do have I'll wait. I'll let us deal with this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. On the amendment only, any further discussion? Councilor Archer?
Yeah, so I'll just explain a little bit further. I was able to meet with both parties, people of the neighborhood, and both are in agreement for these specific terms. As I've discussed before, the current contract zone isn't well written, and many of these events can be done, but under the auspices of a public charity, things of that nature. This would have to then be policed by our city staff. So what they're asking for is just clarification where we clean it up. When I did meet with neighbors who were, I don't want to say opposed in a negative sense, but just who wanted to add additional input into this amendment, having limitations such as 20 really defines, like, you cannot have more than 20 self-events. They are, by the state, allowed to have 100. So we're putting additional restrictions down to 20, that they still have their primary business is private, but they can have 20 of these events. You'll notice that I made the amendment to stricken, what was the term specifically, similar? Nope, when I said these are what they will be, there won't be, they have to be the items listed in red on this document that the administrator has. So it will get rid of this similar event, and that does create a lot of confusion. What was there was one other item. And again, they're allowed to have 288 participants on site. That was on the package here, and they did agree down to 200. So the self-sponsored events are going to be a little bit more restrictive, but identified, and it's cleaner than what we currently have, because in the end, they can do everything that's been identified. One of the things that I know some people had contacted me about was, how do you track it? How do we make sure they only have 20? This bureau thing, I would encourage staff, I'm not going to put it as part of the amendment, on how to draft this up. Maybe this gets submitted to the city, in which then we keep it on record. So once there's 20 in one calendar year, it's done. This is a negotiation. I mean, I think this is how government should be. You can't get rid of the business. It will operate as is. So if you don't, if the planning board said no, I hear that, but you're not going to stop what's here. What we can do now is clean it up a little bit, make it tighter, and then just have a document that we can work with. And again, there is now a, how do we track it? 20 events, something similar to this gets submitted to the city. I'll leave that in staff's hands. So again, this was a compromise. It's not perfect. I'll admit that on both sides. It's not perfect, but it's something that we can work with.
Thank you, Councilor Archer.
Yes.
Any further discussion on the amendment only? Councilor Berman, then Councilor Hatch. Councilor Berman.
Just a question of clarification, really. It sounded like there was a section to be filled in by legal, and so I'm confused exactly what we're voting on right now.
Yeah, so the terms that I used will be the intent. So legal will clean it up. For example, they may get rid of it, make some more editorial comments. I was informed by our city administrator that this could be done this way. We've done it in the past where we approve something. And then again, not the intent of the amendments, the editorial legalese of it. So again, these things in red are going to be strictly identified. There's not going to be the term similar. How to include the term limits, or the limits, I should say, things like that. So I hope that does answer your question. But I was provided on Thursday guidance that this way could be done.
Thank you.
Basically, just we would have our city attorney draft
Yeah.
his exact intent with appropriate language.
And would that come back to us, or would that simply be incorporated after today's vote?
I would anticipate it would not have to come back. I guess there could be a request that it come back once that it is drafted by our city attorney. But it is common for our city attorney to draft language of motions and intents
After.
of councilors.
Thank you.
Councilor Hatch.
Yeah, I just wanted to publicly thank my colleague, Councilor Archer, for trying to mediate what has become a very complex situation. And I also would send out kudos to the applicant and the neighbors who have expressed concerns about what's happening. This is the third contract zone that I have dealt with in my short council tenure. Every one of them has been a real struggle. And this is why I have asked that we, at some point as a council, deal with the contract zoning provision of our ordinance and try to figure out how we can make it more efficient and more appropriate. So I'm hopeful that we'll all be able to collaborate on that at some future date. I do have one question about the contract, and it has to do with paragraph 9, I think it was the original, talks about the establishment of an educational horseback riding program in affiliation with Thornton Academy. And my question is that in place? And maybe the applicant can address that.
Councilor Hatch, can we deal with the amendment first and then go back to the main motion and deal with the contract zone?
Okay.
So on the amendment only,
Yep.
any further discussion on the amendment? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I would agree with both the prior councilors, specifically Councilor Hatch's just comments on CZA process in general. I really think that we, at council level, need to clean it up. I've been saying that for years. In particular, I think that what the planning board actually follows, and honestly, if you read the ordinance, it's what the city council is supposed to follow, and we never have. And I mean that by voting on the 4 standards. I've never been a part of a council that actually voted, that said this is how, our findings of fact, just like the planning board. And honestly, I'm really shocked that we haven't been challenged legally on that. And in agreement with Councilor Archer, I think that this is a real good lesson in CZAs or contract zones and the problems when you leave things to be very ambiguous. And this clearly is ambiguous, and I certainly can understand how River Winds has felt, hey, it's a similar events. And when I think back to that time that I was on council, that was my issue with the definition of place of public assembly. I didn't choose it. And, having been several years younger and not as experienced, I admittedly let that slide, and I wish I hadn't. But I think that this is a good opportunity, as Councilor Archer has presented, to clean this up, and it seems fair to me. So I appreciate that also, Councilor Archer taking kind of the bull by the horns on that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? On the amendment only. Roll call vote, Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
The amendment passes 7-0. Back to the main contract zone agreement. Councilor Hatch, you had a question regarding
Article 9
Article 9.
of the original contract required the establishment of an educational horseback riding program in affiliation with Thornton Academy. And I'm just curious as to whether or not that's in place. And if it isn't, and I'm just trying to make sure we've got a valid agreement going here. Article 8 of the revised, I'm trying to follow the logic here in the contract, it's not very clear. But there's an Article 8 that says failure of the applicants to establish that riding program within 1 year of the approval makes the contract null and void. And I don't, if we're going to clean things up, I think we probably ought to try to clean up any discrepancies, if they do in fact exist. I don't know that they do or they don't. So
Well, I could respond to that.
please.
We did develop the horseback riding program with Thornton Academy, and it kind of died off because of lack of interest. So it was established,
Okay.
and it is not continued. Is that all you wanted to know?
Any further questions?
Okay.
Ms. Austin, you're not opposed to, if there's interest, you're not opposed to reviving the program? You're just saying
not
that
at
the
all,
program,
no.
lack of interest hasn't been
Right.
utilized.
It's not working right now because there hasn't been any interest, but I wouldn't be opposed to doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the main contract zone as amended? Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it may be somewhat of a moot point for this contract zone amendment, as we seem to have come to some consensus. But it seems to me that this one and other contract zones in the rural conservation district attract a special amount of attention, I think because of the conservation nature of the zone, which of course is designed not only to protect land, but also protect a fairly unique way of life. And I've been reflecting a lot over the last few weeks about how we best do that, how to conserve that land and that way of life. The large farms that used to occupy that land simply aren't economically viable anymore. Big rural houses are available to only a few to experience these unique parcels and beauty. And these are things that make Saco somewhat special, and I'd like to see passing on those values from that way of life and making these beautiful pieces of land available to more Saco citizens. We also want to avoid council picking winners and losers and playing favorites, which is something that's happening, I think, or some feel is happening in the current contract zone system. And so I'd encourage us, especially with some unclear rules and contract zones, as we rethink the comprehensive plan, to rethink the role of the Rural Conservation District and what type of businesses and properties belong in it that will help us preserve the land, make it available to lots of Saco residents, and preserve that special way of life so that we can avoid putting these contract zones and small changes and make it fair, equitable, and just for everyone.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Any further discussion? Councilor Johnston, then Councilor Hatch. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I hate to bring up old business or dirty laundry. I'm just still confused going back through the material this weekend. Where are we at with the toiletry system? Did they, as I recall it back in 18, I think I actually was at that planning board meeting, there was a requirement to have, I guess, permanent plumbing fixtures, is I guess how it's defined. There was an email at some point through the code office that, at least to me, seems to establish that the need is still there, and I don't know. So I don't know if there's staff that can address that issue. I mean, obviously the applicant can, but I don't know if that's necessarily the most appropriate process to determine if we are meeting.
City Administrator Canrath, Councilor Johnston has asked a question if the departments have gone out and looked at and have an opinion on whether the site has adequate toiletries and
I think I know an answer, but I do not see codes or planning staff in attendance tonight, so I don't want to speak for them and possibly say something that's a little bit off. But I don't know if the applicant, if you want to provide some further information about interactions you've had with the city and where that stands with the bathroom facilities.
At the moment, we have a trailer, a bathroom trailer that I purchased, and it services 400 people. And the city, the code has given me a year to consider and put in bathrooms like I originally thought the plan had originally said. So for now, because of COVID, he's giving me a year to work that out.
Councilor Johnston, did that answer your question?
Yeah,
From the perspective of the applicant, of course.
Correct.
And for now, the trailer works perfectly. You're welcome to come take a look at it.
Again, I'm not in a position to tell you about plumbing, so if the code office is saying that it's kosher with their office, I'm fine with it. I just wanted to make sure we addressed it back again, because I was totally unclear about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Archer.
Yeah, so I will attest to the applicant that the code officer did tell me this, that there was an extension to the year. He did go into that there's, I'm less informed on this, but there's two different statutes or two different code books out there, and that's what's creating the confusion. So I am aware that the 1-year extension was provided. He directly told me. So.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. Any further discussion? Councilor Hatch.
Yeah, I just want to indicate that I had a similar question, and Councilor Archer, we have a communication from the code officer in our packet that's dated June 15th that indicates that the trailer appears to be very well built, but it fails to meet the state requirements for the place of assembly, but there's no mention of the extension, but I'll take it on your word that that is in place, and that'll answer my question.
Any further discussion on the contract zone amendment, the contract zone amendment as a whole? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote on the contract amendment as a whole. Counselor Archer.
Aye.
Counselor Purdy.
Yes.
Counselor Gunn.
Yes.
Counselor Berman.
Yes.
Counselor Hatch.
Yes.
Counselor McPhail.
Yes.
Counselor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to what was item D, now item G. It was tabled on July 12, 2021. A final reading, budget amendment number 1, a COLA adjustment. Counselor McPhail. Excuse me. Let me take that back. Is there a motion to untable?
So moved.
Counselor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second to untable, Counselor Gunn. Roll call vote on untabling. Counselor Archer.
Aye.
Counselor Purdy.
Yes.
Counselor Gunn.
Yes.
Counselor Berman.
Yes.
Counselor Hatch.
Yes.
Counselor McPhail.
Yes.
Counselor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion on table passes 7-0. Counselor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As part of the fiscal year 2022 budget process, a portion of the COLA was included as part of the approved budget in the individual pay lines. Additional funds were appropriated into payroll contingency to be reserved to bring the total COLA to 3% following union negotiations. It is common practice to mirror the COLA received by union and non-union employees. This amendment simply redistributes the increase to the individual pay lines from contingency. It is important to adjust the COLA to the 3% amount to create pay equity between non-union and union employees, address compensation concerns, and ensure retention of our employees. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the second and final reading of the Budget Amendment Number 1, Fiscal Year 2022. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Counselor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Purdy. Any discussion on the cost of living adjustment budget amendment? Seeing no discussion, a roll call vote. Counselor Archer.
Aye.
Counselor Purdy.
Yes.
Counselor Gunn.
Yes.
Counselor Berman.
Yes.
Counselor Hatch.
Yes.
Counselor McPhail.
Yes.
Counselor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to what was item E, and now item H, and that is page 51. It was tabled on July 12, 2021, first reading, Chapter 81, conveyance of city-owned property, 32 Market Street. Is there a motion on table?
So moved.
Counselor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor McPhail. To untable, roll call vote to untable. Counselor Archer.
Aye.
Counselor Purdy.
Yes.
Counselor Gunn.
Yes.
Counselor Berman.
Yes.
Counselor Hatch.
Yes.
Counselor McPhail.
Yes.
Counselor Johnston.
No.
Motion on table passes 6-1. Counselor Hatch.
A city-owned property at 32 Market Street is proposed for a possible sale to Southern Maine Affordable Housing. The 1.5-acre parcel was the subject of an effort by the City Council in 2013 to promote affordable senior housing. That council approved the motion to enter into a developer-friendly agreement at minimal cost for the land, contingent on a 10% of the resale of units being directed into a housing fund that would benefit future city efforts to encourage affordable housing. With agreement in hand, the SMAH developed a plan for a 10-unit condominium project intended for downsizing seniors, those who are selling larger homes and looking for a smaller, affordable housing alternative. This item was reviewed by the Planning Board at its April 6 meeting. The board voted 6-0 to forward a positive recommendation for the sale of the parcel, while recognizing that the parcel abuts the Boston and Maine rail line and may be the future route of the Eastern Trail, for which an easement would be considered. I move to approve the first reading and to schedule a public hearing for August 23rd, 2021.
Motion's been made by Counselor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Gunn. To approve first reading and set public hearing for August 23rd. Any discussion? Counselor Johnston.
Thank you. Perhaps I missed it, but I don't really understand what's changed. We tabled this with several questions, really dating back to months. They still haven't been provided. I don't know why they haven't, but I just don't see the purpose of moving this forward when we ourselves as council don't have our own questions answered. I mean, it honestly should either have just died on the table, or like we should just dispose of this and be done, because we need the answers. I think I've identified the problem several times now, and I'm not really clear why we don't have an answer, but I'm still seeking that legal opinion too. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
City Administrator Kenrath.
Thank you. Just to respond, I know City Planner, at the time, City Planner Hamlet did reach out to Attorney Murphy to get clarification on a number of those questions. I believe he did distribute an opinion. Perhaps he did not in the shuffle. We're also, unfortunately, without our city attorney this evening. As you heard earlier, Tim is out of state this evening. So if there are specific questions, further for Tim, perhaps it will be wise to table this again when we have our city attorney present. But I know Bob did reach out to Tim for answers to those questions. And I believe, Councilor Hatch, you're nodding, you did see those responses?
Tim's opinion has been given to us. It was pretty clear to me that he was opposed to this and was going all the way back to 2011. The issue pertained to bond counsel. What happens if we just go about doing this as is? What's the repercussions with bond counsel? I have a feeling what they are. I've asked opinions myself, but that's my own personal reaching out to attorneys. I think the city should, because I think the repercussions are not something that we really want to go down.
I believe that was one of the issues he offered an opinion on, but if we need to get that again or further clarify, or perhaps he didn't see it, I'm not promising that. We can go back to Tim and get further information on that.
Thank you, City Administrator Kenrath. Councilor Berman?
Yeah, I just want to echo Councilor Johnson's concerns. I believe my questions related to the consequences of violating the open spaces bond and whether there were methods for remediation or paying back or transferring the obligations incurred by that bond. And I don't believe I've seen a response to those questions yet. If there has been one, I missed it.
Councilor Hatch?
I'm in agreement. The only communication we have is from Tim reaffirming his original point that he believes that this is in violation of the bond, but I don't think that answers your question, Councilor Johnson, and I think it's a valid question. I'm prepared to vote no on this motion here because I think we need some more answers, and I don't know that if a delay on this might give the developer an opportunity to kind of sort through the details and maybe come back to us with maybe a little different approach to how they might want to develop this site. I don't think anybody, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that we're pretty pro-affordable housing. I just think we need to maybe back off on this a little bit and give everybody else a chance to weigh in. So that's my own opinion.
Any further discussion? Councilor Berman?
I remain, in light of our conversation earlier this meeting, I remain unclear then of the consequences of voting no on this and whether this prohibits the ability of this property to come back to us for a year or merely until December when we have a new council.
The council can continue to the public hearing and get answers to the questions as you continue through the process, and then still vote no at the end if you don't feel that the process was done correctly or the process was done and your answers were made satisfactorily. So, I mean, in order to avoid any more tabling, any more delays, any more untabling and then going through the reconsideration and what have you, is you can move to the process to the end and then make a final vote at the end.
Well, if I may, I think it makes more sense that we just let this motion die tonight. I move to approve the first reading. Just don't approve the first reading, and this item could come back in subsequent months. because it wouldn't be a new item, because we never officially voted on it. So, I mean, I would suggest you just let it die.
Any further discussion? Okay, Councilor Purdy.
I just wanted to say that I agree with Councilor Johnson, or we need to let this one go until we get the actual answers that we're looking for. I mean, I'm certainly for the project, but any legal problems that we run into using that property where open space bond money was used to clean it is just something I'm not prepared to do right now. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote on the first reading. Councilor Archer.
No.
Councilor Purdy.
No.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
No.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
No.
Motion fails, 3-4. Motion dies. Bringing us to item F, or what was item F, on page 67 in your packet, a first reading, order authorizing the City of Saco to borrow an amount not to exceed $50 million and to apply for and accept state and federal grants and funding, if available, to construct and equip a full water resource recovery facility upgrade located on Front Street, and that is Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The WRRD facility on Front Street is prone to hydraulic backups consistent of aging infrastructure built at an elevation susceptible to sea level rise and is limited to meet anticipated regulatory requirements and support community growth. For these reasons and more, over the past 2 years, the WRRD has been studying these impacts and planning for its long-term health. The Coastal Resiliency Ad Hoc Committee, WRRD, and the Communications Department partnered with U.S. EPA to evaluate site alternatives, and the site design with the highest benefit-cost ratio was recommended. At its July 26 meeting, City Council expressed consensus to have a first reading tonight to consider authorizing of a bond question for this project. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the following order in substantially the same form as presented. Order authorizing the City of Saco to borrow an amount not to exceed $50 million and to apply for and accept state and federal grants and funding, if available, to construct and equip a full water resource recovery facility, upgrade located on Front Street, and further move to schedule a public hearing on the order for August 23rd, 2021. I move to approve the order and the public hearing schedule.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman.
It was Councilor Hatch.
I'm sorry, Councilor Hatch.
That's right.
With that, Emily, would you like to come up and present any information to the council?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for City Council for having us on the agenda tonight. I'm excited to be here to go over some of the answers to your questions that you had at the new business meeting.
We're just waiting for a presentation, obviously, to come up on the screen. Sorry for the...
New technology, click share.
No share screen? You can't share screen right now? It's not Zoom?
It's almost there.
It's the green button at the bottom. Okay, looks like we're up.
There we go. So to recap, on July 26, Howard and I brought this forward as a new business item. We shared the results of the EPA AAA evaluation analysis, which recommended the highest cost-benefit ratio score for this plan that you see on the screen here. After that presentation, there was consensus from council to move forward with a first reading for a not to exceed $50 million bond question for tonight's meeting. We are not alone as a community. In the state of Maine alone, the Clean Water Needs Survey has estimated that there's about $1 billion of needs out there between 2020 to 2030. We also have been seeing that there's historical infrastructure investment that's expected from the national level on both water and transportation projects. We want to be ensure that we're in the best shovel-ready position to move forward when the funding becomes available. So one of the questions that we received from the council at the last meeting was what the Saco's debt limit and debt margins are. And we reached out to RKO, the city auditors, and we were directed to the city's financial report as of June 30th, 2020. It's actually on page 131. Saco's debt limit as of June 30th is over $398 million. Their debt margin, the debt margin means the amount subtracting what's already on the books for long-term debt. Right now, Saco has about a little over $23 million of long-term debt. So that leaves a debt margin of over $375 million, which means that Saco could potentially borrow that much more. Obviously, we're not advocating $375 million, but we're just sharing what the data is that we have from that financial report. And you'd have to follow all the state statutory limits with this, so $375 million, but there's certain percentages on statutory debt with which are listed in the state statutes. If you had more specific questions on this, Cheryl Forner, who's assisting us in Glennis Salas' absence on this project, is available tonight. She's actually in the back, and she might be able to answer more details. We also took a look at what other communities have on their books for long-term debt to take a look at the regional perspective. As you can see, Saco is quite low here, and the amount ranges throughout the communities from $23 million in Saco to more than $430 million in Portland. Obviously, our population is much different than Portland, so what we wanted to do was review per capita debt as well to get a better understanding of what that breaks down to based on population information. So you can see on this slide here that the per capita debt per community ranges from 2022 in South Portland all the way to 8,318 in Sanford. Saco's, you see here, is 1,209. And just so you know, RKO, the city's auditing team, compiled both this slide as well as the long-term debt slide. We did add 2 communities here, Falmouth and Sanford, but everything else was from their analysis. Looking at this, the average rate or per capita debt for comparison is about $3,829. The other thing we did, if the slide would load, is we looked at recent sewer-related projects that we were aware of in the area. This breaks down estimated project cost and an estimated community population. For Biddeford and Old Orchard Beach, those amounts are not yet shown on their financial audits because they were bond questions that their communities approved in November 2020. Biddeford's is closer to about $10 million of that for sewer infrastructure. Old Orchard Beach we see as $23.5 million. Their population is a little bit smaller. In Portland, they've spent a lot of money on sewer infrastructure, which includes CSO work. That's $85 million plus. That number is actually a little closer to $91 million. And in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, we didn't report them on our communities because they're not a main community, but they just spent $92 million upgrading their facility on Pierce Island. So we thought it was important to take a look at what other communities have before them. As Howard mentioned at our last presentation, a lot of the sewer infrastructure in the region is 50 years plus, and there's climate change impacts that we're all kind of experiencing. So we thought that this would be a good slide to show perspective along with the others. And you can review any of the details of the presentation notes on our references slide. And just look forward to your questions, but just so you know, Bond Counsel has drafted the draft order that you see in your packet, and they have reviewed all the documentation in support of tonight's first reading packet.
Thank you very much, Emily. Any questions? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. I think it's kind of important when we talk about debt, we also equally point out that the city of Saco has just about zero school debt. So when we compare ourselves to all those communities, last I checked, they all have significant bonds for schools. So I think that's important. I do have a couple questions that were posed to me this week after our last meeting, some of which were actually from people across the river. And so one of them was, when we were looking at this study, did we at any point consider maybe a combined wastewater treatment plant with the city of Biddeford? I know that they have some issues, and again, I'm not qualified to actually state what they are, but I know that they have their own issues with their treatment plant. So that was a question that was asked of me. The other one was, are there current deficiencies with the cleanliness of the water that we're putting out, or is this strictly the desire for this upgrade? Is this strictly having to do with climate change, sea level rise, or are we not producing clean water from our current plant? And then the other one that was asked actually yesterday to me is, if we're going to spend this amount of money for a brand new facility and the issue is sea level rise or climate change, why wouldn't we look to put this facility on higher grounds versus the current grounds, which are right next to the river? I didn't have an answer for that, but it seemed like an interesting question. And then the other question, and I don't know if it was in tonight's slide or last week, but there was a slide that said the cost of doing nothing is $43 million, and that wasn't really clear to myself what that meant. Was that like a catastrophic failure because of a natural disaster? And if that was the case, wouldn't FEMA funds or other federal agencies kick in? And then just an overall question from myself, could this wait? I think that, as I emphasized last week, the largest issue we have in this community right now is school construction, and I don't really want to place the two against each other. And one can say, oh, well, it shouldn't, but at the end of the day, I generally know how voters go out and vote, and they look at the overall figure. They don't really care or need to understand the mechanisms, and I do have concerns that you'll have people that look at it and say, hey, we just approved $50 million, which to my knowledge would be the largest bond we've ever done in the city of Saco. So when we turn around a year from now and we go to do school construction, that could be, if we do, and I say school construction for our schools, and that's plural because the real issue here is no longer just Young School, it's all of our schools, including SMS, because as we've seen, particularly during COVID, every last one of them have deficiencies. And we really should be looking at addressing all of our school issues for all of the schools with this bond issue. Understandably, the state may chip in a percentage, but we could be looking at a very large bond, and I don't really want to risk the potential, and I will call it potential, that people look at this and say, hey, we just gave you $50 billion, I'll give you 75, and thereby we don't address our real issues with the schools. So that's just my personal thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Emily, are you prepared to answer any of those questions today, or do you need some time at perhaps maybe the next meeting if this goes forward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can provide some preliminary responses and then follow up with a more detailed written report, because I want to make sure that the answers are provided. As far as considering combined plant with Biddeford, I know right now we have a lot of piping and existing infrastructure that's all set in the ground to go to the existing facility site. But like I said, I will fully address the answer to that. As far as current deficiencies with cleanliness of the water, as far as I know, we are meeting our current permit. That doesn't mean that we will necessarily meet future anticipated regulatory requirements. A lot of what's coming from the DEP will be increased requirements for nitrogen removal, which we do not meet. We do not have capacity to meet right now. But again, I will respond more fully in detail on that. Additionally, this project would allow us to take care of another CSO that we have at the site. So we have 2 existing right now. So this project would help us with that combined sewer overflow. Question number 3, I think, was for the facility to be located on higher ground. We did take into account different options when the project had started. I was not on the water resource team at that time, but I can get you a full response to that. The current location of the plant is where it is because it's gravity fed from everything else. The cost of doing nothing, I will respond fully on that. It did come from the Maine Climate Council's analysis, and it was adopted from their September 2020 report, and it's in the Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan from the governor and the Maine Climate Council's work. And question 5 is, I believe, more of a policy question for council. I think we've presented a lot of information on the long-term debt, that there is capacity there, but I'm happy to present more information if it's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Any, Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Emily, could you go back to that slide that was the debt per municipality? This is less of a question, but more of just a concern of mine. I just wanted to put it out there. So I'm willing to move this forward, only because there is a sense of interest, and ultimately the citizens will vote on this. So that's why you're not seeing, I have reservations, but I want it to move forward, is when we talk about future liability, especially related to projects, if we just take into consideration this $50 million bond, potentially, I know there's reimbursement, but our total liability could be that amount. We go for the school system, and those are, I mean, it's easy to estimate 40, 50 million, depending on what that school could be. High schools go, I mean, we don't have a high school, but I know high schools go in the 90 million range. Middle schools and less are a little bit cheaper, so I do have concerns there. So we're already looking at $100 million in potential liability over the next 5 years. And then we have 2 other major projects. One's not so major, is that satellite fire department. I believe that was $6 million, give or take. And then specifically this jetty. We may be taking on a 10 million, 6 million, so on. So I'm seeing about 110, or another way to put it is $1/10 billion in loans. Again, these are called bonds, but they're effectively loans. So I do have some serious reservations. I definitely understand the need, but sometimes we have to identify competing resources. The reason why I wanted to bring this chart up is if you add just, I'll go on the lower side of $100 million, I'm not even taking into consideration the jetty, is that would put us about $125 million. That puts us at the 4th highest in our state, based on these numbers here. And 2 of them are significantly larger than us. Sanford would be the one that's kind of like the outlier. So I do have reservations on what we're putting forth. Again, I want to move it forward just because in the end, ultimately our citizens will decide on any type of bonds. But I want it to be really known that we do have a laundry list coming to us, and it's just a concern. Again, when we can get federal funds, awesome. When we can apply other things and get that debt down, that's great. But I also want to applaud the city of Saco. There's a reason why we actually financially can take $100 million out, is because we've been, as long as I've been on council, we've been anti-bond when necessary, trying to find monies when we can. So that is actually a testament to how we operate. But again, I don't want to start creeping up to, I think you want to incorporate, sorry, I got distracted there. again, I'm just recognizing this right now, and it's a concern. Definitely problem solving, definitely finding those additional funds. I just wanted our citizens to be aware that we are looking at about $1/10 of $1 billion in potential loans, bonds, with financial funds coming to us. So I want to move it forward because we do have a time deadline on this one to get it onto the ballot. So I think it is important, but again, ultimately, it's not the council that will decide this, it is our citizens. So.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, too. Sure. I really appreciate everyone's comments from council and wanted to just let you know that we are actively identifying every grant and federal funding opportunity that's possible. We actually started doing that in November, and we were very close to applying for building resilient infrastructure communities, but we just didn't have the shovel-ready worthiness to go forward with that. Additionally, we are on the 2 lists by both Senator Collins and Senator King in the amount roughly of about $4 million. That is preliminary because it has to go through the bill-making process, but that was very good news for Saco to be included on that. And the draft bond order, I'm sure you've already seen it, but it does offer opportunities to accept federal funds and financing if it's available, and to actually reduce the total amount borrowed to accommodate for any funding that may be received.
Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Emily. You hit on the subject I was going for. Is there any kind of a idea as far as time frame when we might know what's available for grants or funding from the state or the Fed?
Thank you for that question, if I can, Mr. Mayor. That's a great question. I heard on the news today that $1.2 trillion was moving forward on discussions, so that's the only information I have as far as that funding. There was some additional funding that went through the state of Maine just recently for LD 1733. There's also some federal funding that comes out through different grants and resources like the Building Resilient Infrastructures, and we are, when I say we, the Water Resource Team is on all and any of all of those lists. So we also looked into EDA funding, so we've been actively pursuing funding as much as possible. We were also told that we were very close to being included on Pingree's list as well. But so that's great that we actually got on Senator Collins and King's.
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd remind the council and the public who will ultimately be making the decision that last meeting we saw a video of a storm that caused the tanks to overflow right into the river. So while I'm sure Emily is right that we're meeting our standards and obligations as legally required, certainly at that moment we weren't doing our best. In addition, our current sewer treatment plant will fail to meet anticipated growth to be able to continue to provide clean water. Currently, sensitive electronics are located below the anticipated storm surge line. So as frustrated as Saco voters would be to see another $50 million of debt piled under our books, they'll be even more frustrated when they can't flush their toilets for several months while we await FEMA reconstruction funds to rebuild the sewer that's washed away in a hurricane. Right? We simply don't have a choice in fixing this infrastructure. It's expensive, it's hard, it's coming at a terrible time, but we need clean water, and we need to be able to provide it, and this is the tool. So I hope my fellow councilors and the public will join me in voting yes on this. Thank you.
Thank you. City Administrator Kenrath.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to add on one more funding source to Emily's list is also our American Rescue Plan funds, which we have about just under $2 million forthcoming. They can also be used for wastewater infrastructure.
Thank you. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you. I just want to add, too, that when we are looking at the priority of all of the things coming down the road for us, one thing that we have to remember is a facility like this kind of starts all of the other priorities. If we don't have a functioning, sustainable resource facility, all development, all future growth is not going to be able to go forward. I believe I heard that Ready Seafood takes almost 1/3 of our capacity, and that's just one business. So if we want to be looking at other businesses coming in and working on our master plan developments and everything down the road, if we don't have this facility to be able to take on the addition, and that includes a new school, you all of a sudden have everybody in one location, it may not be able to handle it. So unfortunately, everything is going to tie in together, and they are going to go hand in hand as we move forward. So prioritizing, yes, it is important, but this is at the center of all of it.
And Mr. Mayor, oh, excuse me. I was just going to add that we serve more than 12,500 residents, more than 380 commercial business, that includes school entities. And we did an analysis that shows that there's about 7,000 jobs that are supported by the businesses that are on the sewer line. Additionally, in the last year, a review of code permits shows that we have 70% of development happening on sewer services. So if the facility is hit hard by a weather event that we can't recover from, it could have devastating impacts. One of the questions about the $43 million was great that was brought up. We are also working with Charlie Colgan, the former state economist. He is doing a study of the treatment facility and of main drinking water, but he will be giving us more details on what the true economic cost of losing the treatment plan or components of it would be. And that would be more detailed on specific areas of the plant.
Thank you. Councilor Hatch.
Just a couple of comments. And again, we brought this up at the last meeting. The potential to get access to a lot of this money is somewhat dependent on shovel-ready projects. It just enhances our ability to say we're ready. So I just want to continue to encourage the council to think about that as we try to move this process through. And then my second comment has to do with public awareness, and I would just encourage that become a sort of a joint effort between wastewater and schools, so that we look like we're coming out collectively as a team, recognizing the importance of each of those stakeholders. And I think if that's effectively communicated publicly, I think it will only, enhance our ability to get the general public on board and say, you know, to Councilor Berman's point, we have to do this. So, but we can do it together, and we can do it along with the school. So that's just a couple of points.
Any further discussion on this item? Councilor Archer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to kind of ditto what Councilor Hatch just mentioned, but when we brought in the new public facility, public services facility, we did some great education, public education. So I'd almost want to kind of mimic the efforts that we did there because I think that was a great success. So that was 4 years ago, I think, during the public education side. I'm losing track of years now.
2017?
Yeah, give or take, yeah. So I did see that was very helpful, informing the public, and I know there were meet and greets and go to the facility and all that good stuff. If we can kind of mimic what we did in the past, I think that could be a good model to use.
Mr. Mayor? Yes, I very much appreciate that. I actually pulled that out from 2017
there you go.
after the July 26th meeting, so thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote on the first reading. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to page 86 of the agenda. What was item G, now item J, first reading, Charter Amendment Number 1, Section 2.06, Vacancies, Forfeiture Officer, and Filling of Vacancies. Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the Charter, as described in MRSA Title 30A, Chapter 111, Section 2104. The process for making amendments to the Charter requires a public hearing before a vote by Council. Additionally, if approved by the Council, the item would be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment focuses on the steps to be taken in the case of a vacancy in the position of mayor or councilor. Staff has provided alternate A and alternate B for council's consideration. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the charter amendments included in the document titled Saco City Charter Amendment 1, 2.06, Vacancies, Forfeiture of Office, Fulfilling of Vacancies, dated August 9, 2021, and further move to schedule a public hearing for August 23rd, 2021, before a vote to add to the November referendum.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. City Administrator Cameron, did you want to give an update on some of the other charter amendments that didn't make it into the
Yeah,
packet?
just a quick update. We will have the additional charter amendments, I believe, from Councilor Johnson, also Councilor Gunn, had some at our next meeting. We put these on first, but Attorney Murphy is drafting language for those amendments that you'll see at our next meeting forthcoming.
Any discussion on the current charter amendment number 1? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I feel like this may be perhaps the first time we've seen this. Maybe I'm wrong. I feel like we're making this overly complicated. To me, we just go back to what the prior system was. I mean, it was based and tied to the term. So in the instance where you have the mayor, for example, there was less than a year left, you would just have the deputy mayor fill in until that election where the mayor was going to be elected anyway. In the event you have the mayor with 2-3 years left, we hold the special election. I mean, that's really should be what we do for the citizens. We don't make the deputy mayor for however long. And the same goes for council. If we have an opening on council and there's less than a year left before the next election, you just do the appointment as we've done. I like the addition of adding in the process, but why are we having the mayor make the appointment? I mean, it makes no sense to me. It should continue on the way we've previously done it, where the council makes the appointment to the ward for that period of time. If there's more than a year, we have a special election. I don't really fully understand why this has been submitted. I thought we had those conversations last fall, I believe it was. Maybe it wasn't fall. So, I mean, that's what I would support moving forward. Thank you.
Councilor Justin, I think the idea here, if you can see from the language, is now that the terms have changed and you're going to have a new council every year, the idea is to not hold special elections, which require a lot of time, money, and resources, whereas you're going to have a general election every November, and it's going to start a new term because of the different councilors that will be coming in and off because of the staggering of terms. That's what Attorney Murphy is saying. You have a new council coming in. Instead of every 2 years, you're not going to have that system anymore. You have a system where every year there's a new council because you have some members leaving, some members coming in.
Yeah,
so the idea here is to just have them proceed until the next election rather than scheduling a special election. A special election puts a lot of time, money, and resources on the city clerk's office to get volunteers to go through the process. So the idea is if you have an election coming up, it's going to be a new council anyway, you put somebody into the position until that time, and it's going to be less than a year from the last election. So it's never going to be more than a year out. It may be
Maybe you're correct. It's not how I was reading it, and it's fine. It wouldn't be the first time that I wasn't reading it the way. It just seems like a lot of language there that leaves it unclear to me. But we keep talking about this new, I've heard Attorney Murphy's opinion on this before. It's a new council every year, and that's fine and dandy. But why is it then that we're not all equally sworn in every single year? Like, we're still based off terms. So, like, I understand, again, in principle, theoretically, it's a new council, but it doesn't seem to jive with the idea that we weren't all re-signed, sworn in. And so if that's the case, as you're indicating, then I'm fine with that, but that's not the way I read it. Maybe somebody else can clarify. I'm just saying that, again, so if you take myself, for example, I have 2 years left on my term. If I was to resign tomorrow, why not just hold a special election and fill that position for the 2 years, not give somebody 6 months, 7 months, whatever it is now, not even, a seat for a few months. Just fill the rest, to that next election and fill it for the full term with an election, not appointments. I mean, we've got, no offense, but we've got 2 appointed city councilors up here. You're not elected. Like, that needs to end. It was never the intent in the past. And I understand that staggering terms really screwed up several things, but I'd like to make this, back to where the people have a voice and not us or the mayor or whoever. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Council, the idea here is to do exactly what Councilor Johnston is suggesting, and that if Councilor Johnston was to resign or something really bad happened, we would fill that in the general election in November, not create a special election to fill it. It would just be filled in the general election in November. If Councilor McPhail, Councilor Gunn, and Councilor Archer run for re-election and they're successful, they will be newly sworn in on the first meeting in December because they're the first folks that have come up for election in the staggering of terms. So moving forward, every year you will have new people sworn in. So that is Attorney Murphy's position, and it has been for some time on many things, that the staggering election creates a yearly term for the entire council, but not individual terms. So the idea, I think, of what we're trying to do is exactly that. If there's more than, if you're within a year from a previous election, you appoint and then you hold an election that November. That's the idea. And whether it's for 1 year or 2 years into their term, you would hold it during that general election in November. So that's the idea that we're trying to move forward. I know there's several questions, so we'll move on. Councilor Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Despite being an appointed councilor, I agree with Councilor Johnston that elections are much better suited to fill vacancies. And because of that, of the 2 alternatives presented, I prefer the alternative A that does include elections. I am, however, worried that among the many words there, some are missing. And in particular, alternative A, bullet point 2 on page 87, talks about what happens if there's a vacancy. The mayor shall nominate and the city council can confirm a supermajority vote from those letters of interest, an eligible or qualified resident from the applicable ward following a public hearing before the council to hold office until the next regular municipal election. But it doesn't say what happens at that regular municipal election. And I think the intent is that somebody is elected to fulfill the rest of the unexpired term. But that's not written there, and I think needs to be. Therefore, I would move to amend this, that a qualified resident at the applicable ward following a public hearing before the council to hold office until the remainder of the term can be filled at the next regular municipal election, clarifying that it is the remainder of the term that needs to be filled at the election.
So the amendment is to add in language into option A?
Into option A, bullet point 2, page 87, reading, the remainder of the term can be filled at, between the words until and the next regular municipal election.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman to add in for the remainder of the term on option A, bullet 2, page 27? 87, sorry.
87 of the packet.
Can't even read my own writing. Any discussion on the amendment? Or excuse me, is there a second?
I second.
Councilor Archer, thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? Councilor Gunn.
Yes, again, I'm just following the conversation and just trying to make sure I'm straight on this, though, because we have the device in here that if the vacancy is less than, well, if it's longer than 75 days, that we would, no, less than 75 days, we'd have a special election outright. So therefore, we wouldn't have a situation where there was a vacancy in the council, we appoint, just as we do in the current system, effectively an interim counselor, although they're a counselor de facto as well as de jure, and then get to the end of the year, like literally 2 months later, and have another election. The special idea of the special election, if it's within that 75-day frame, would then at that term then in fact be like the special election at the end of the year to fill the rest of the term. Am I following that correctly?
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, Councilor Gunn, I believe the situation that's missing without this amendment is if a councilor resigns more than 75 days prior to the next election.
I see.
We would be appointing somebody until the next election by this language, but what occurs at that election is not clear. Are we electing somebody to a full term? Are we electing somebody to the remainder of the existing term? The status of that election is not clear. It is clear in the section on mayor because the deputy mayor creates a different case. But here we have a temporary appointment, we have a regular municipal election, but we don't talk about what that municipal election accomplishes, and that's what I'm trying to fix.
Yeah, you're correct. It should be to the next regular municipal election in the fall. And the reason we did 75 days was because normally nomination papers are available for 40 days before an election. They have to be turned in 60 days before the election. So we gave like a 15-day time period, and we looked at it. We didn't feel comfortable that the mayor would be able to collect 200 signatures in a 15-day period. Council, you probably would be able to do the 35, but that's why we figured that we'd do the cutoff as 75 days, and that would have to be a special election if that happened.
Any further questions? On the amendment only? On the amendment? Seeing no more discussion on the amendment only, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
The amendment passes 7-0 to amend item A, paragraph, or bullet point 2 on page 87 to add in for the remainder of the term. Back to the main motion. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Johnston.
I'd like to amend item 2 under page 87, where it says, "The mayor shall nominate and the city council confirm with a supermajority." We strike the mayor and just have city council nominate the way we've done in the past.
The amendment's been made by Councilor Johnston to remove the mayor and add city council. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
No.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. Or, excuse me, the amendment passes 6-1. Back to the main motion. Councilor Berman.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification. The motion read doesn't specify whether we're moving forward with alternative A or B. Do we need to make a motion to specify that, or will both alternatives move forward to the next reading?
The way I'm reading the motion is both move forward to the next meeting.
Mr. Mayor, then I move to amend that only alternate A move forward to the public hearing and second and final reading.
Second.
Amendment number 3. Option A, as amended. Moves forward. Second by Councilor Archer. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, the amendment to only move option A forward as amended. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
The amendment passes 7-0. Back to the main motion now as amended. Seeing no discussion, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Main motion passes 7-0. That brings us to, on page 90 of your packet, what was item H is now item K, a first reading charter amendment number 2, section 4.01, School Department and School Board. Councilor Berman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the Charter as described in MRSA Title 30A, Chapter 111, Section 2104. The process for making amendments to the Charter requires a public hearing before a vote by Council. Additionally, if approved by the Council, the item will be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment focuses on the steps to be taken in case of a vacancy on the school board. Staff has provided alternate A and alternate B for Council's consideration. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the charter amendments included in the document titled Saco City Charter Amendment Number 2, 4.01, School Department and School Board, dated August 9th, 2021, and to further move to schedule a public hearing for August 23rd, 2021, before a vote to add to the November referendum.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Discussion? So again, there's two alternatives for this. So if you want to make amendments to the alternatives, or if you want to amend to actually only take one alternate forward, please go ahead and make those motions. Councilor Johnston, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say I want to say it's a little uncomfortable, but it is a little bit to have this discussion without having even discussed the change with school board. But I would like to amend, I guess it's alternate A, which seems to be the most in line with what we just did with council, but again, strike the mayor and allow the school board as a whole to nominate.
Okay, so amending alternate A, number 1, removing the mayor and replacing with school board. And again, I think just to address an item that was stated, this is not to subvert the school board. This is how the selection process, so that it mirrors the city council process. That's all we're doing here. We're not changing the requirements for such. We're just mirroring practices so that it's easy for everyone, including the city clerk's office and staff, to properly go through these type of vacancies that occur from time to time. So the amendment is to remove the mayor and have the school board. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Archer. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is something I probably should have asked before the vote on the city council one, but it's something I just wanted to clarify, that we're not superseding existing council language, existing charter language, that if we ever got in the situation, and I doubt that it would ever happen, but you never know, that if we had a situation where there was a vacancy in the council, in this case, the school board and with you as the mayor as the presiding officer, if there were no letters of interest, would, and a certain amount of time passed, such as it is now, would it still fall onto the mayor to essentially appoint a school board member or a council member to fill the vacancy, I suppose under the device until the next municipal election, so there wouldn't be a vacancy in either seat?
City Clerk Hughes.
I don't believe that, okay, actually in 2.06 of the mayor and council section, there were number 2, C2, fill in the vacancies. If the council fails to make such appointment within 30 days, the mayor shall appoint an eligible person to fill the unexpired term within 10 days thereafter.
That's the current language. I think Councilor Gunn is asking, with the changes that were just created or just amended and being ready to put out, with those changes in the city council and then also on the school side, remove that function.
Yes. Because that language is all struck on page 88.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes, thank you, Michelle, because I think I don't want to speak for the council, but I think the consensus would be, since we kept the idea that we can fill a vacancy in the council by essentially the same device that we're doing right now, only that the term of the new councilor would go to the next municipal election. And it's effectively the same thing with the school board once we get to that, hopefully. That if we have a situation where there are no nominees and no one for the council to put forth and vote like we did for Councilors Berman and Hatch, that the mayor has the ability to appoint a councilor, but not for the end of the term so much as to the next municipal election. And then at that point, if being an election season, you'd like to think that there would be some residents that would be interested in running for the vacant school board or city council seat to fill out the remainder of the term. Again, I think my interest in it was to make sure that there would be no vacancy on either board for that year, but then at the end of because if the public doesn't want to, put themselves out there and fill out a term, that's their right, though. But as school board and the city council, it's our responsibility to have a full voting quorum so that every ward is represented, and we would have the ability, well, the mayor would have the ability, if no one wanted to step up, to fill the vacancy until the end of the year, and hopefully someone would run. And I think that's what we should have ingrained, whether it's through an amendment or language to make sure that would be the case. I mean, as I said, it would rarely ever come up, though, but I wouldn't want to see a situation where 60 days pass and there's a vacancy and just no one, puts themselves forward. I mean, you never know what happens. And we're down one counselor or one school board member, and you'd hate to see that happen.
Thank you, Councilor Gunn. We are on amendment for A, item alternate A, number 1, removing the mayor from the school board process on page 91 of the document. So on the amendment only. Any further discussion on the amendment only? So we're replacing the mayor with the school board. On the amendment, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
No.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. Or excuse me, the amendment passes 6-1. Back to the main motion as amended. Councilor Berman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to offer the same amendment I offered for the council. I think it needs to be clarified that at the next regular municipal election, it's to elect for the remainder of the term. And, yes, well, if I can make both amendments at once, I also further amend to move forward only with option A.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman and seconded by Councilor Johnston to amend item A. Amend item A, number 1, to add in the remainder of the term and make item A, let's take them separately. So
Okay.
on the first one, amend item A1, number 2, to add in remainder of term. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote on the amendment only. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Councilor Berman, you're going to make a motion to now move forward and change the original motion to only item A, or alternate A.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. I wish to amend the motion to exclude alternate B and include only the amended text under alternate A.
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion on the motion? On the amended motion? On the motion as amended, no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me, the amendment passes 7-0. Now to the main motion as amended 3 times. On the main motion. Any discussion on the main motion? Seeing no discussion on the main motion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
On the main motion, 7-0, motion passes. That brings us to item 10 of the agenda tonight. There is no new business. Item 11, administrative update. City Administrator Canrath.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have some transition in our planning department I wanted to update you on. So, as you know, our planning department has seen some transition. Longtime city planner Bob Hamblin has retired effective 8/6, so last week. Will be staying on with us in a part-time transitional capacity only to assist our new incoming city planner, who I'm happy to say is Jason Garnham. Jason will officially be starting later this week. He comes to us with many years of municipal planning experience for the city of Kent, Washington, a community with a population of 135,000 people. He is an AICP certified planner, holds a master's degree in planning, and brings with him a vast amount of experience that will serve us well. But Jason is also a native of this area who only moved to the West Coast for graduate school and ended up working out there for the city of Kent and finds himself, for family reasons, wanting to relocate back home here. So we welcome Jason, are very excited about him starting this week. I think he's going to be a tremendous resource for the city, and with his experience in a much larger community, as well as his New England roots and his credentials, will make an excellent addition to our team. Some other news: Isabel Exley, our planning department administrative coordinator, has unfortunately also submitted her resignation to pursue other career opportunities. So in light of this transition with that position, and in light of the planner transition happening, we have moved quickly to recruit a replacement for Isabel's position and hired Lisa Harmon to fill the vacancy. Lisa comes to us from the town of Kennebunkport, where she has served as the administrative assistant to the planning and code enforcement departments for the last 15 years. Lisa will be another tremendous asset to the department and aid us in the transition with her significant experience in codes and planning in Kennebunkport next door. So we welcome Lisa also. And lastly, the third part of the musical chairs happening in planning is with the addition of our new assistant city planner, which was established in our budget for fiscal year 2022. This is a new position, and obviously in light of the workload and everything else happening, we wanted to move on this position sooner rather than later. We have been able to recruit Molly Kirchhoff as our new assistant city planner. Molly will begin her duties here on August 16th. Molly comes to us from the city of Sanford, who is the city of Sanford's planner and has a vast amount of municipal planning experience. So I think we're lucky to have her join our team also. So obviously this is we just rebuilt an entirely new department. The timing just worked out the way it did. I can say this, we hired 3 extremely strong, well-qualified people. I think we are lucky to get them. The task now will be taking 3 brand new people and plugging them in here for Saco City Planning. So I think it will be obviously a learning curve for all 3 of them. They're well equipped, but I think we should expect that we have an entirely new department. I'm not sure this has happened very often, but unfortunately the circumstances in this case have warranted that, and I think we've done an incredible job with recruiting and maybe some poaching also, some good people to fill those gaps. So we wish them the best. We're excited to have them. I'd also like to thank Emily Roy for her assistance on the HR end of this in recruiting and onboarding Jason, Molly, and Lisa. So they will be with us all within the coming weeks. If you're here in City Hall, please stop by, say hello, introduce yourself, and we have high expectations for them, and I think they will meet them. Arts Commission, I was glad to attend our last meeting of the newly formed Arts Commission on August 5th. They're beginning to get involved in some great work. They'll be a huge asset to the community. They discussed, among other topics, downtown murals, Saco Transportation Center display case, public online art directory, and also some projects that could possibly be placed on the Eastern Trail. So a lot of good work going on there. They're just getting started, but I think they have a lot on their plate and will add quite a bit to our community. I will just repeat this again because it's important information. The nomination petitions reminder, they are now available for city councilors' seats in wards 1, 3, 6, and 6 for a 3-year term. School board for wards 1, 3, 5, and 7 also for a 3-year term. Wardens and clerks for wards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, a 2-year term. 35 signatures required, and those petitions are due back by September 3rd at 4 p.m. to the city clerk's office if you have interest in running for office. That's all I have. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, City Administrator Kinrath. Any questions? Okay, moving on to item 12, council discussion and comment. Any council discussion and comment tonight? Councilor Berman.
Mr. Mayor, following our discussion tonight, there's considerable confusion in my mind about the disposition of defeated motions, and especially in regards to what I think Robert's rule calls reconsideration or separately renewal of defeated motions, and the timing and ability of them to be brought back to the floor, and whether that occurs after a year, whether that occurs with a swearing in of new councilors, and what can be done at the same or next meeting. And I would greatly appreciate it if we could get a clear opinion from our city solicitor to clarify those issues in my mind.
Thank you. Any further discussion and comment? Okay, moving on to item 13, executive session. Is there a motion to enter executive session?
So move. I don't have my thing up. Give me a sec. I put it down.
I'll read it in.
Yeah, thank you.
Be it ordered that the City Council enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 4056, discussion regarding real property, use of property.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Archer to enter into executive session. Any discussion? A roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to enter into executive session at 9:09 PM. Executive session will be downstairs in the conference room. Okay. Is there a motion to come back out of executive session? Come back into regular session.
So moved.
Councilor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion? Roll call vote to come out of executive session. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 9:35 PM. Item 14 of the agenda, report from executive session. Councilor Archer?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I authorize the city administrator to enter into a purchase and sale agreement for 2 Hillview Ave, Saco, Maine.
Motion's been made by Councilor Archer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 15, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Councilor McPhail, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on adjourning? Roll call vote to adjourn. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to adjourn at 9:36 PM. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Okay.